Good afternoon once again. This is Dr. Amina Al-Deen for Muslim Network TV and my program Critical Talk. We are continuing today a segment on mental health, especially in the Muslim community. And yesterday, we got an opportunity to learn about SEMA, which is an intervention group that works with the caregivers for those with mental health issues. Today, I have the honor of talking with two young women, Ms. Sheikh and Ms. Ahmed, who are both, one is licensed, the other one is just graduating and passed her test, um, who work more so with what's called emerging adults and with adolescents. And that is an extremely important part of our population because they have to have outlets to process all of these things that are happening. So, welcome to both of you. Assalamu alaikum. And let's see if we can tackle this. Um, let's start with the adolescents, Ms. Ahmed. Um, when you say adolescent, what age range are you speaking of?
So the age range that I work with are from 14 to 18. So individuals who are in high school.
Okay, great age group.
Mm-hmm.
And how, because in our communities, all of our ethnic communities, mental health is a little bit of a taboo.
Right.
So, how do you grab hold of young people who want and need to settle themselves with the anxiety and stress?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really starting to raise that awareness surrounding that adolescents and kids who are younger really do experience a lot of these mental health issues. I think a lot of the times as a community or society, fail to recognize that, you can be younger and have not gone through many experiences in life and still kind of experience certain mental health illnesses or even just like anxiety, depression, things like that. So I think that first and foremost is very important to start recognizing that, and which is why I'm so grateful for conversations like this, where we can start bringing these topics to light and discussing how these populations are affected as well. So I really think first and foremost, it's kind of raising that self-awareness. What are signs of maybe we are struggling a little bit with our mental illness? Like what are certain signs that, really show us that maybe we could benefit from some external help or external resources? And kind of starting to recognize that within ourselves, and then so that we are better able to kind of identify what could be beneficial and helpful for us. So especially within that younger population, I think even just having conversations like this is a really great starting point just to help those individuals recognize that maybe I could use some help, or even just to normalize kind of what they're going through.
Well, this is a conversation, so Ms. Sheikh, please jump in whenever you wish. What are some of these signs and symptoms?
So it would definitely, whether it's the adolescent population, whether it's the adult population, children, symptoms can vary depending on what it is that's going on with the person. It can be regardless of the age, whether it be a mood disorder, whether it be neurocognitive, whether it be a developmental delay, everything will have or whether it be something like eating disorders, or honestly, whether it be something that a lot of people are going through right now, just pandemic fatigue. Any of these,
got that one.
Mm-hmm. Many do. And I the reason why I bring that up is to normalize that a lot of people are going through that. Symptoms of all of these things can look different, but if I were to pinpoint something that can be similar in all of them, would be a hindrance in daily functioning, not being able to perform your daily tasks, not being able to go into work, not being able to keep a proper diet, disordered sleep, angry outbursts, difficulty managing your relationships, whether it be with your friends, your parents, your spouse, your children. So mental stability can be a very large spectrum depending on what's going on with the person.
So
And
does that include like this awful, what I've been hearing a lot about is sleeping all the time?
sleeping,
Yeah.
like oversleeping, yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah.
sleeping. I can't stay awake. Every time I turn around, I'm asleep. I can't get anything done
Mhm.
because I'm asleep.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think something here important to also identify and recognize too is that all of these things that we just mentioned aren't necessarily indicative of having a mental disorder. But, these things, when we notice these things occurring with us, it can always be beneficial to still get help because, if it's prolonged, if these things are going on for a long time, perhaps it can develop into something a little more severe. And just, experiencing some of these things are inherently very difficult and can really affect our day to day. And so, again, really important to recognize that we can still get help even if we aren't necessarily struggling with a mental illness.
Well, how do I know that I or one of my kids needs help? I mean, we're talking about adolescence, and it could be hormone levels, could it be COVID or Zoom fatigue? How do I begin to differentiate between normal problems and problems where help may be required?
Yeah, I think kind of similar to what Sama was saying a little bit earlier, what I would say is kind of that prolonged difficulty in day to day tasks and day to day things. Like if we, like Sama was saying, if we do notice ourselves, or you notice your kids, or somebody else in your life sleeping way more or sleeping way less, or we kind of notice weight changes, maybe eating way more, eating way less, or we notice like an inability to kind of go out with friends and have get pleasure out of the things we normally would have gotten pleasure out of, or just maybe difficulty with like even basic things like hygiene, maybe difficulty like taking care of ourselves, like brushing our teeth, getting out of bed, things like that. So kind of if we're noticing those things that would be typical of our normal functioning, not there anymore, or somebody lacking in that maybe for a prolonged period of time, a couple weeks, it could be beneficial to reach out for help.
So, how do we talk to the person who is exhibiting these symptoms about reaching out for help? Or do we go and get the help whether they want it or not?
Mhm. I do think that depends on exactly what's going on. If you feel like they're struggling with their day-to-day life, a conversation is enough. But I do want to kind of highlight there, if it seems like it's something, life-threatening or something like that, then definitely making that call yourself is important. But if you find a family member, a friend struggling with their mental health, the first thing to do is to, I would say, reflect on the relationship you have with that person before having that conversation. Because we
Mm,
want to make sure that the person that is addressing this with them is someone who they will open up to, who they
mm,
will talk to about this.
okay.
And if you are not that person, then it would probably be best to reach out to someone they will open up to. Another point I'd like to make there in that conversation is, especially with the large stigma towards mental health, especially in this community, whether it be South Asian, whether it be Middle Eastern, that whole community, it would be very important to normalize what they're going through. Make
Say
sure
more. Say more.
normalize what they're going through. Like it seems like, if I were to give an example, if I'm trying to have a conversation with a friend of mine and I feel like they seem kind of off, I would say, it seems like you've been kind of stressed these days. Is there something? You see, a lot of people are stressed right now. Like, even though it's summer, I can't believe the pandemic is still going on. Like, a lot of people are going through it. Like, how are you managing? Kind of give them a question, address it in a question, like, how are you taking care of yourself right now? What are you doing for yourself right now in your day-to-day life? Are you doing anything for yourself to make you feel better? And that should give you an idea whether this person is taking care of themselves or not.
Okay,
Mhm.
we're going to take a little bit of a break, but I want to come back and explore how in all of our communities, doesn't matter which ethnicity it is, and it doesn't matter if you're non-Muslim, mental health
Right.
has a stigma.
Right.
And given the stigma that it has, aren't parents most likely to overlook, and friends most likely to overlook because of the realization of that stigma? We'll
Mhm.
be right back. This is Dr. Amina Al-Deen, and I'm in a wonderful conversation with Ms. Sheikh and Ms. Ahmed, who are going to help me through my lethargy and anxiety and, I mean, struggling with depression. And we will be right back after a short break. Hello, this is Dr. Amina Al-Deen with Muslim Network TV and the show Critical Talk. And I'm speaking today with two expert ladies, Ms. Ahmed and Ms. Sheikh, with regard to mental health. And when we left off before the break, I wanted to, and I think that this is one thing we need to explore is how do you get people in the community away from the feelings of shame and humiliation enough so that they take care of business.
Mhm. So I think awareness starts with being becoming aware of the facts.
Mhm,
What is mental health? What is mental illness? What does mental stability look like?
mhm,
A lot of the stigma comes from the fact that if you have a mental diagnosis or if you're feeling some sort of way mentally, not feeling well mentally or emotionally, then there is something wrong with you.
mhm.
Has an automatic negative connotation to it.
Right, right.
The way, I mean, it's a to unlearn and relearn. I guess it's been kind of a theme in the past year, right? To relearn
Yeah,
the things we've been taught and the things that have been passed down, intergenerational and things
right.
like that. To do that, it's very important for the community to open up to learning new things. And the way we would learn new things is to have platforms as such, and as many of the other ones out there, like you were talking about SEMA earlier in the conversation. There's organizations like Project Taqwa that are, Muslim mental health movements, or in every community right now in 2021, there are people that are trying to spread awareness about this, just so people understand that anybody out there can be struggling with their mental health. If you're struggling, that does not mean you have a diagnosis. You should not be labeled by your diagnosis.
Yeah, and to further answer that too, I think another important thing to maybe keep in mind and consider is, a lot of the times we also talk about Islam and mental health, right? And I think that it can be really beneficial to kind of see both of those two things as a relationship rather than maybe both of them as a single entity. And what I mean by that is that, of course, like, Islam plays such a vital role in kind of our mental stability, our physical stability. And it's an important part of many people's lives. And I really think that, especially when it comes to mental illness, just as it comes with physical illness as well, right? If we're struggling with something like a broken leg or, a severe physical disorder, something like that, cancer, things like that, of course we're going to bring Islam into our lives and we're going to try our best to do that and pray and make dua and things like that. And, alongside that, we also take measures needed to take care of ourselves in that physical way. We go to doctors, we go to our appointments, we, take that step. And so when it comes to mental health as well, kind of looking at it in a similar way of, we can pray, we can make dua, we can do all of these things. And we reach out for the resources that we need to kind of help ourselves in that way. And so I really liked what Saima said earlier of kind of unlearning and relearning. Because I know a lot of people sometimes kind of look at both those things as a single entity. And we've heard a lot of people say, if we're struggling with something, we just pray and then that you'll feel better. But there's more to it, right? We can pray and we take care of ourselves in ways that are in our control as well. And so just keeping that in mind and raising awareness with those type of conversations in households as well.
Well, I think a part of the chagrin on the part of members in the community is not being able to distinguish between a perhaps temporary depression
Mm-hmm.
or temporary anxiety and more extreme illness like a schizophrenia or paranoid schizophrenia or manic depression.
Mm-hmm.
So help us along here in understanding what happens. No, how do we distinguish between something that may be temporary, where group sessions may help, and even something that is more serious, where group sessions still may help?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, there is a very large spectrum, right? From acute to non-acute. There are individuals that have to be hospitalized for what they're going through. There are individuals that can go to outpatient therapy and just seek counseling and support, and where the therapist would work through whatever it is that they're going through, and they're able to come out of it.
Right.
Now, how to distinguish? I would say a professional would do probably seeking a professional's help would be the best way to find out what it is exactly going on with the person, what kind of help they need. But as a third party trying to figure out what kind of help somebody needs, some signs to look for would be something that I had mentioned earlier was what's going on with them. A temporary depression, a temporary anxiety will be triggered by something. If there is something going on in that person's life, phase going on in their life that's causing this anxiety, that's causing this depressed mood, this depressive state, then that's a different story. Then it is a temporary phase. There is a trigger there, there's a cause there.
Right.
Causes of mental illness can vary. People can be born with it. A brain injury can cause it. A traumatic event can cause it, or it just happens. You don't know until there are so many diagnoses that cannot really be established until a person is 18. So, it's there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of gray area.
Well, I'm just thinking about a lot of times, especially the young people with manic depression, which
Mhm.
often doesn't get diagnosed until they're college age.
Right.
And you wonder what happened before. But here we are coming out of a pandemic, and it's not just the pandemic and the quarantine, it's what's happening with the Rohingya, it's what's happening with the Uyghur, it's what's happening with Muslims around the world.
Mhm.
And you see this press. There was a family mowed down in Canada the other day. I
Right.
mean, you have all of these stressors
Mhm.
and triggers, and you're wondering, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? And
Mm-hmm.
that in itself can trigger a depression or an anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's so great you bring that up as well, because I think a lot of people also maybe don't know about this or don't recognize the fact that these external events that maybe don't directly impact us can be traumatic
Yeah.
for individuals and really, cause some of these mental illnesses or can really exacerbate some of these things. There is a term for it, actually. It's called vicarious trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a form of trauma. It is something that can really affect a person even if they haven't directly experienced it. And I think it's also great to raise awareness of that as well, because a lot of people don't recognize that occurs.
Right.
Oh, it has to be. I mean, as Muslims, we have watched the Black Lives Matter movement, the assault on the Capitol, and we're saying, oh my God, what the hell is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to settle in your subconscious, if not your consciousness, as some I should be doing something because Muslims believe in justice. And I'm sitting here. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no outlet, and then at the time we were kind of sequestered in the house and there were not a lot of outlets, the masjid for many, not all, has not been an outlet. And so younger Muslims have made third spaces where they can go and talk among themselves. And I think that that's wonderful. But I don't know. I think they kind of need to have one of you guys there to guide the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Because then it can become a pity party. Oh, yeah, you feel bad. I feel bad too. And nobody gets anywhere. And you come away feeling worse than you did when you went. But I want to try an experiment. You two ladies, uh, Ms. Sheikh is taking on Ms. Ahmed as a trainee in some place or the other. Here I come. And I'm first of all timid because as a Muslim, I know all the stigma attached, but I'm going to try you out because you're women.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been looking for a female therapist forever. And I come to you, start a session. It's going to be a 5-minute session because I don't want you to know all my business. So this is going to be a 5-minute session.
Which one of us do you want us to do it?
I'm the patient.
Okay, I can go ahead and start it off. Thank you for joining the session today, Dr. Amina. In session, is it okay if I call you Amina?
Oh, that depends. You're too young to be calling me Amina. I'm old enough to be your grandmother. But okay.
Well, Dr. Amina, what brings you in today?
I've been noticing that I can't get much done.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to, and I have loads of writing to do and things to do, and I seem to have lost my focus. And the minute my focus goes away, I go to sleep. Something is not right there. That's never been me.
Mm-hmm. And how long has this been happening?
Since about the second month of the pandemic.
Okay, so it's been over a year now.
Right. And it's just getting worse.
Okay. All right. Well, before I go into some other questions, I'm interested in kind of knowing if you would expand what kind of motivated you to make this appointment with me today?
Well, first of all, it's because I found females. As a Muslim woman, I don't want to talk to the men.
Mm-hmm.
That's very uncomfortable for me. And it might be because I'm older, but I feel much more comfortable talking to women. Mm-hmm. And then secondarily, I feel more comfortable talking to Muslim women because they're not going to blame Islam for my trauma.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I see you've mentioned a few words here like Islam and trauma. Before we go into that, I'd like to tell you, since it is the first session, a little bit about how this process works. As the first session, it is usually plays a role of an intake almost, where I would ask you some questions, you would answer them. We get to see if we connect with each other. Although I am a female Muslim therapist, there has to be a vibe, a connection, a rapport between two people in order for you to feel as comfortable and safe to be able to express with me. And my role here is to provide a non-judgmental, like you said, a shame-free zone for you to be able to express what it is that you've been struggling with in the past year or the years before that. However long you've been feeling some type of way, my role here is to create a space for you to be able to express that.
Even though you're the trainee, Ms. Ahmed, would you approach it the same way?
Yeah, definitely. I think what's really important about these first sessions is really to, before even getting into a lot of, what are we bringing in? What are some of the things that are going on? It's really important for both parties to feel that, this relationship is comfortable for them, something that they can really, further explore, open up to each other. And so the job of the therapist, or, something that we try to do within the first couple sessions is really work on building that rapport and building that relationship. Just as any normal relationship, it takes a little bit of time. And so I would definitely approach it in a similar way of kind of trying my best to help you feel as comfortable as possible, so that we can kind of delve into topics that are a little bit more, deeper and kind of can be, more difficult to touch upon.
Right. Adding on to that, I think the role of the first session for anybody, in this conversation or listening, is important to understand is the role of the first session is for the individual to understand, especially if they have not sought out therapy before, is that the purpose is for you. These sessions, this therapeutic process is only for you. Although I am here, or although us as therapists are individuals that are professionals and may seem like we're in the position of authority, but this whole process is for your empowerment, to empower you, to help you through the struggles that you're going through. So once we establish that in the first session, along with the rapport, then the therapeutic process can begin.
I see. Let me ask about another scenario. Suppose I know I love scenarios. Suppose I am a woman and my girlfriend has helped me sneak away from an extremely abusive husband, and he's made it an abusive household to get to see one of you. And I don't know that I can do long-term therapy because he might find out I'm coming. How are you going to speed up the process so that I get some help?
Mm-hmm.
I think that first and foremost, the most important thing in any therapeutic, setting as well, is to establish that the client or the person coming in is safe. So I think that in that respect, there are many different services out there. If I'm somebody who maybe does services that are a bit more long term, I would help that person with the best of my ability to find something that can be very quick and very short term. What's really great about this field is that there are so many different settings in which you can reach out, kind of get that service that you may need. And so in that particular situation, I think it would be very helpful to find somebody who can maybe give that initial quick support, even if it's not maybe necessarily more therapeutic, but it could be something to kind of help that person establish safety, and find a place that they can go and feel safe. That's even something that a therapist or somebody can help do.
Right. I think in a scenario like that, most important is, like you said, safety planning.
Mm-hmm.
If they were not able to make it to us the next week for a next session because of whatever is going on with the abusive husband or whatever their circumstances are, it would be our role, our responsibility to make sure they will be okay, provide them the resources to reach out to other individuals or other hotlines or organizations that can help them.
Yeah, and so therapy can be extremely beneficial, and even just finding those resources that might be good for you, and finding those resources and helping to get in contact with them.
I think so. And I'm thinking about yesterday we touched on, but really didn't spend a great deal of time on. And that was the intergenerational stuff, where young people have grown up in an abusive household or abuse or a household where there is mental illness, and they come to believe that's normal. And they also are told, don't talk about what you see that goes on in here. So it kind of shuts down. And after a while, that becomes the standard kind of thing to say. And it shuts down even their ability to know that help is needed. I'm going to take another little quick short break. I want you to think about that and then come back and talk to us about the intergenerational issues, because these people grow up and get married and have kids of their own, and they bring the trauma with them. This is Dr. Amina Al-Deen, Muslim Network TV, and the show Critical Talk. And I'm here with Miss Ahmed, Miss Sheikh. I'm having a ball, and I've had my therapy session. We'll be right back. Mm. This is Dr. Amina Al-Deen, and I'm having a continuation of a talk on mental health. This conversation has been lively and hopefully instructive for all of us listening. I have with me today Miss Sheikh, Miss Ahmed, and I asked you to think about the intergenerational stuff, where sometimes young women believe, because that's how they've been raised, that men being rude and emotionally and physically and psychologically abusive to their wives is normal. And so they marry men with the same traits.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to intergenerational either mental illnesses or trauma, I think
Mhm.
again this is something very important to recognize that this mental illnesses or trauma can move past generations. It's something that can be genetically predisposed, and it is something that can be carried on from generation to generation. Especially even I think when we speak to intergenerational trauma comes to mind, especially because I think a lot of people don't recognize that certain traumas that are faced by one individual can then move on from generation to generation and really affect the way that we behave, how we respond emotionally, how we, treat other people within our family or our lives. I like to bring up this one example of, if we kind of look at it through a case by case scenario or a person, right? So
Mhm.
say, we have one individual who is maybe an immigrant, right? He comes to the United States from a different country and has maybe experienced some type of trauma, well, at some point in his life. When he tries to cope with this trauma in the United States, he maybe turns to kind of attributing his unwanted traits to other people. He starts acting out, yelling at his family members, maybe being abusive towards his family, taking out his aggression on family, things like that. And so, say this individual then has a daughter, right? This daughter then is growing up experiencing these outbursts, this irritability, experiencing her father acting like this. So then, to cope with this, she kind of learns that if she's really good at maybe controlling certain things, or if she's really good at, trying to handle her dad while walking on eggshells, then her father gets less mad. So then these behaviors start, she starts focusing on this. That kind of becomes her norm. She starts realizing that if she reacts emotionally to different things, maybe with less emotion or with more emotion, then her father gets less mad. And so, when she's raising her own family, then it kind of again moves on from generation to generation. So
Right.
I think that's very important to bring up and something to bring to light, and that the different behaviors and responses that we're exhibiting to our family members or to people in our lives can really affect the way then we in turn react and respond to these things, and then that can continuously be passed on from generation to generation. And even when it comes to mental health, especially, for example, if I may be experiencing or dealing with a certain mental health illness, and something that may be left untreated can then move on from generation to generation, right? It can pass to maybe down to my kids or things like that. And so I think even just bringing that up is such an important topic, and kind of raising that awareness of how we're interacting with people in our lives, how we're dealing with certain individuals, and how in turn we're dealing with other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think.
No, it makes sense. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, Michelle.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I think it's important to also realize that breaking the cycle is difficult, but not impossible. There is a lot of work that goes into. There usually is in a family at some point, especially I think a lot that's happening now in present day society is that individuals are, mostly adolescents, are realizing this concept and learning about this concept of intergenerational trauma and recognizing it within their own families or within their friends' families, or they're seeing it. And then it's like, okay, now I see it. What do I do
Right.
about it? Because some of these, especially if they're adolescents, they don't really have much control realistically to break such a large cycle that's been going on for years and years and generations to come. So the first step, like Iman said, would be the awareness of it, recognizing it. But two, the goal doesn't necessarily have to be to break the cycle for everyone, but I would say focus on yourself and make sure that you're overcoming this trauma so you don't pass it down to your generations to come.
Wow. I'm just thinking about, I think when many of us think of trauma, we think of either our own ethnic group,
Right.
our own family. But when we look out, as I was saying before, we see the Palestinians, we see the Uyghur, we see the Rohingya, we see Muslims, even here in the United States and in Canada, under stress, you know, largely coming from violence. And the trauma, while it is somebody else somewhere else, it still settles,
Yeah.
and it can become quickly trauma for you. I guess
Right.
that's what I want to say.
Most
You
definitely.
internalize it, and it becomes, oh my God, it's just everywhere. I can't do anything. And that feeling of helplessness can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
So,
So
in our last few minutes, give me some hopeful stuff. You've told us about signs. Um, you've given us kind of a time mark. Well, if you've been noticing this for a couple of weeks, it may be time to get a head start on it and make sure everything is okay.
Mhm.
But if we're talking about high school kids, and we have clusters of Muslim suicides, somebody is not getting to somebody. And the feelings of depression with social media and how quickly you can get duped into doing something you don't want to do, and that exposure leads to feelings of there's no way out of this.
Mhm.
What do we do as a community beside, in addition to, or maybe inside of, bringing that awareness?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Iman.
I don't know. I was gonna say one of the things, like, of course, like you said, awareness is one of the main and big things. Something that came to mind for me right away is if we bring mental health to, again, first of all, conversations within our families, and support systems, but not only that, kind of if we bring mental health into areas, other institutional areas within our lives, whether it be schools, whether it be universities, kind of, speaking to, kind of tackling these issues at a younger age for individuals. If we start raising those conversations when kids are younger, when they're in elementary school, when they can start to understand what is mental health and what is out there for me to access if maybe I'm feeling this in this way, and then even just discussing of how it's not bad or wrong to feel these kind of ways, and bringing these conversations into institutional levels and kind of normalizing it a lot more within our community in different areas. So not just our families, not just within social media or things like that, but then also in these other areas of our lives, just to continue to normalize it so that people can know what help and what steps that they can take if they are feeling extremely hopeless or worthless and things like that. And it's so great that you mentioned that as well, because it is such a huge thing within adolescent communities.
Yep.
The suicide rate, especially within the Muslim community, is alarmingly high, and something that not a lot of people know about because it's not really discussed,
Right.
why this happened or what maybe what caused it to occur. And so if we're kind of starting to tackle this at a younger age, even if maybe we have individuals in our lives who aren't necessarily struggling with their mental health, but still bringing those conversations into our homes, into our schools, our masjids, things like that can really start, increasing the normalcy behind it.
Yeah, and I do think that the reality is that, fortunately or unfortunately, it starts at home, whether it's the support, whether it's the neglect, whichever way we're going, it starts at home, especially for children, adolescents, emerging adults, people that are at home. It does start at home, and to keep a positive environment, to keep a praising and positive environment is very important, because, and the point I want to make here is, the opposite of hopelessness is gratitude. The more grateful we are, the less hopeless we will be. So to practice gratitude is a mechanism that increases life satisfaction. And it is also a mechanism that is, I would probably say, very not utilized. I don't see a lot of people utilizing it. I personally didn't utilize it majority of my life because I would say, just culturally speaking, it's always about how can I be better? It's always about what more can I accomplish? It's always about what am I lacking so I can be better, so I can be good enough.
Well, for many of the young people, that seems to drive them over the edge, especially in an age of bullying, whether it's in person or it's on Twitter or TikTok or whatever. It seems to be driving people over the edge. The young girl who in the ninth grade is a little chubby becomes chubby and a tub and a this and a that and the other. And she's just trying to find her way.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we, I don't know, and maybe we ought to continue this conversation indefinitely, because I don't think that we're really paying attention. I mean, here in Illinois, for example, Now it's mandated that you teach about sexuality in elementary school. How are young Muslim kids going to handle that? You know, somebody's got to say you're being taught one thing one place, and you're coming to school being taught a totally different thing.
Mhm.
And how do you not make faces or, shake the hands of, or little boys going to same sex bathrooms? I mean, how is all of this going to be handled in a fashion where we come through it mentally healthy?
Right. It's difficult. I'm going to be honest. It's difficult, and I will also be honest that I don't have a correct answer or a elaborate answer to that, because that is something that is a new it's a new norm that we're dealing with, and that I think all of us collectively of all ages are trying to figure out, how do we as Muslims navigate through these changes and be able to fulfill our purpose in life. That is something that I think together we are all dealing with right now.
Yeah. Last word, Ms. Ahmed.
No, I definitely agree with everything Sam was saying. And, kind of, I guess what I wanted to also say in our conversation with adolescents and, mental illnesses and things like that, and to kind of reiterate Sima's previous point too, of kind of it starts at home. Just within my work with adolescents, what I've seen a lot is kind of an instability in home life, a difficulty in home life is really can a lot of times be a precursor for some of these different issues. And so I think, like, again, what Simon was saying of really prioritizing how we're interacting with our family members and how we are really bringing up the conversation of mental health and valuing our emotional health as well as our physical health is really important, and something that I feel as a community we can start to bring more into our households to really start tackling some of these things, especially when it comes to adolescents. And so just to reiterate that point that Simon made.
Yeah, they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we're depending on you guys to give us the guidance. And I realize it's new,
Yeah.
and some things shouldn't always become the norm.
Right.
So when they shouldn't become the norm any more than gambling and stealing and prostitution, perhaps, or adultery, then how do we not let them become the norm?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That is the question.
It is a question. Well, I want to thank both of you for an enjoyable few minutes, and have no fear, we will get back to you, because I think mental health is as important as physical health, and it drives a lot of physical health problems. So we can't let it slip off the table. And maybe we'll do a seminar or something where the mental health professionals at various levels can talk to us. This is Dr. Amina Al-Deen. I have spent an enjoyable, and it's been only a few moments with Ms. Sheikh and Ms. Ahmed, and talking about mental health again in various ways, but in ways that I hope that were productive for our audience. This is Muslim Network TV. This show is Critical Talk. Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.